Good evening, Ian. Good evening, panel. So my question is, how concerned should we all be over Elon Musk's intentions to influence British politics?
And I guess what you mean by that is the $100 million that he's rumoured to be promising Reform UK.
Yeah, and also about that, he also vocalised a lot about this petition as well, didn't he? So there's a lot of noises all of a sudden coming from him, which is a bit worrying for me.
Matt Warman, what do you make of this? You're, of course, Digital Minister in Boris Johnson's government, and you've got a long-standing interest in technology. You work for the Daily Telegraph as tech editor. So are you concerned by this, particularly having been defeated by Reform UK in the election? Sorry to remind you.
So thank you for bringing it up. I think I'd say two things. I'd say, firstly, anyone unduly seeking to influence British politics is a worry. We have laws in place to try and stop that happening. But park that. Let's assume that what we're talking about is a legal way of trying to change the political debate in this country. And I think it underlines simply how much work what I'm going to lazily call mainstream politicians, Labour and the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, have to do to convince people that those relatively centre-ground ideas are the ones that are going to make the best kind of progress. Because for me, it's really easy to look at reform and say you're providing a commentary on issues that we all acknowledge exist, and you're pretending that there are easy answers. And the reality of those easy answers is that they lead you only to a place where people are even more disillusioned with politics, because they are not going to work. You can't do all the things on immigration that Nigel Farage might wish we can do. You can't do all the things on net zero that Richard Tice might wish we can do overnight. So I think we have to continue to be committed to that sensible approach that says politicians have got to win the argument. And I don't want to see the argument won by $100 million worth of advertising. I want to see it won by ideas. And I've got enough faith in the British public to think that they are going to engage with those ideas and see charlatans when they see them.
But the Conservative Party accepts donations from billionaires. I'm not sure anyone's ever given quite that amount of money, but certainly over the years there are various people that I can think of who've given tens of millions over a period of time.
And I know you're going to mention the unions any second, and Labour, Ian.
Well, I was waiting for Chris until I did that.
So the reality is, you're right, we do have a political system in this country that is funded broadly by donations. I would rather it was, as it somewhat used to be, funded by a broad base of public support of relatively small contributions. But we are in the system that we are in.
Okay. Kishan.
Yeah, no, it petrifies me. Look, I come from the British Indian community, and it petrifies me to think that someone like Nigel Farage could be in a position of power if things like undue influence or this.
Why does it petrify?
Well, it does, because he actually more for my children, because I'm a product of East African immigration from the Ugandan exodus and Idi Amin. I'm pleased I'm not comparing Nigel Farage to Idi Amin at all, but what I'm saying is this conversation about them and us, which has developed over the last, since, I hate to name the word, since the Brexit vote. It has left a lot of my community and a lot of people within the British Asian community a bit uncomfortable. Successful people from business, from all walks of life, from politics, etc., etc. But so I'm sure Nigel is a great guy, and he's a nice man personally. Not met him, but it worries me that someone of that, who is very influential. Let's not mince our words. Elon Musk has played a part in this US presidential election. And he has no doubt influenced millions of people to vote for Donald Trump. And hats off to him how he done it. I mean, he seems to be a genius when it comes to this. My worry is if he starts to use those types of tactics here, because we are in a volatile situation electorally, like Matt said, that people can be influenced by various forms of extremism, in my view.
But isn't it up to the Labour government to deliver on its promises? So when the next election comes, Keir Starmer can go to the election and say, look, we made all these promises in 2024. A lot of people thought we couldn't do it, but here, this is what we've done, X, Y, Z, and for the Conservative Party to get its act together and become a proper opposition. And then Reform have got a much more difficult job. But if Labour doesn't deliver, and if the Conservatives don't get their act together, I can see the circumstances where Nigel Farage could make a big breakthrough. I did. Yeah. And it wasn't writing an article that I hoped would come true, but I think people tend to write off Nigel Farage at their peril. Chris?
Oh, sorry, I was planning to answer on donations. I wouldn't roll out Nigel Farage at all. I see why he appeals to people, and I particularly see why he appeals to people when, to be blunt, everything's so broken. Public services are broken. People basically haven't had a pay rise for the best part of 2 decades now. And, we talk a lot in this government about delivery and why it's so important that we get economic growth back and everything else. What I don't think we talk enough about is the consequences of failure. Because if we have another 14 years where economic growth is as disastrous as the last 14 years, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to hold on to the centrist democracy that we both believe in. So it's so important for this government, not just for the benefits in of itself, but actually I think for the future of the kind of democracy, centrist democracy that I hold dear, for us to make sure that we deliver on that. And that's what keeps me awake at night, but also gets me into work in the morning.
Emma?
Well, first of all, Kishan, as best I can tell, was a member of the Tory party and a member of the Labour Party, so he might be a member of Reform by the next time you have him on. Anyway, as best I can tell.
He's going the other way. He's going leftwards.
Okay. I just wanted to flag that.
I didn't leave any party. We've heard it all.
Okay. Yes.
That's the line to take.
I will say one thing about Elon, which is...
Are you on first name terms?
What can I say? I'm in the tech community here. I don't want to embarrass anybody else here. I did see him at breakfast a little while ago in Los Angeles. I must say.
Speak to him?
I did.
Did you?
Yes, but he's not a friend of mine, just so that we're clear. There's absolutely nothing exciting.
Is he as weird as his... I mean, I had an interview with his father recently, which explained a lot, let's put it that way.
All I can tell you is I know that he stays at the Sunset Marquee in Los Angeles quite often, so maybe you should pitch up there at some point. It's a small hotel, but it's lovely. To the point about the donations... Is that on
Sunset Boulevard?
It is.
I think I stayed there.
On the
only
corner
time
of
I've ever been to Los Angeles.
Yes, right by Sunset Plaza. I'll draw you a little map in the break.
Anyway, carry on.
We'll call him Mr. Musk. We'll call him Mr. Musk so that I don't sound too familiar. I don't personally think that it'd be fantastic to go in the direction of the USA. I think it's a little bit tricky to think that highest bidder wins and only the sort of mega wealthy have access. Nothing wrong with donations, but I wrote 2 things down in my red pen, not my black pen, and one was the unions seem to be fine. Labour seems to be fine with heavy donations from the unions. And Chris, I listen to your comments, and time again, the thing that I come back to from some of the things you say and talking about growth or success or the economy is, you're right. It's a great time to be working in the public sector. It's the private sector that most business people I know are really worried about.
If I can just sort of one thing about the obvious appeal of Nigel Farage and of parties from the fringes of the left and right, it is that they are perceived to be straight talking. It's what you see is what you get. And one of the huge problems that we have had, and I'm not pretending that this is a uniquely Labour problem by any means, but the fact that there is the perception that you can't trust a single word that politicians say, and yes, it's a Labour point that they come in and they say they're not going to raise taxes, and then they put up national insurance or whatever it might be. I'm sure you can think of Tory examples as well if you want to. But that point of trying to say politics should be about trust, and we are living in a world where people are turning to people with simplistic, straight answers because they don't think that other people are winning the arguments. And that's what we've got to try and get back.
Or capable of delivering.
What you see should be what you get, and delivery is important, and the promises you make are important. And that's what I think. That's why you've got 2 or 3 million people signing a petition about the Labour government. It's because of that distrust and lack of faith. And that's what I'd like. That I want.
Well, that's because your party lets so many people down, including its own supporters like Kishan and me.
I want whoever is in government in this country to succeed. That is the commitment. But if you get to power by saying you're going to be different or reap the consequences.
Okay. Let's go to Mark in Kilburn, who says, with reference to recent polls showing an increase in support for the Reform UK party, should the left of centre parties work closer together in the run-up to the next election in order to avoid splitting the vote in key seats? Now, last night, the Reform leader was named the Spectator magazine's Newcomer of the Year at its Parliamentarian of the Year awards. In his speech, he vowed that there will be hundreds of newcomer Reform MPs before long. Chris Curtis.
No, I don't think we should work with other parties to beat Reform. I think it's up to voters to decide who they're going to vote for, and we put our best foot forward. We make the best case. This government's going to deliver for working people across the country, and that's how we beat Reform, not jumping into bed with those lot who messed it all up in the first place.
Kishan?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I mean, we just, we've got to combat this, and I don't think working with political parties, cross parties, is necessarily the idea.
Emma?
I'm not especially political. I'm just interested in rational, pragmatic approach to infrastructure, growth. So currently Labour do not resonate with me. In terms of reform, though, a lot of... not really, no. But Tony Blair, Tony Blair was more appealing than others for sure. But I will say that a lot of people I know who run businesses voted Reform as a protest vote against the Tory party. So I don't know whether there are going to be hundreds of new little reformers, or whatever the phrase was, running around Parliament in the near future. But I do hope that there are more business people and more pragmatic people with life experience running around in the Houses of Commons.
Matt?
Look, I don't think it's right to suggest that we should have sort of some left-wing alliance against the Conservative Party or Reform or whoever. I think Chris is right to say you should make your own case. But I do think when you see people saying they're going to vote for Reform, it is very often a sign of immense frustration where we've ended up for a whole host of reasons.
Tory government.
And I think you've seen some of the Reform votes go up since Labour in the polls since Labour have taken power. So I think that tells you something about where people are at, and it's not where this Labour government is at.
But there's a poll out today that shows the Conservatives on 29% and Reform on 20%. Well, 49% of the vote, that could get the Conservative Party back into government. And there are many people in the Conservative Party who think that there needs to be an accommodation somehow with Reform. Nigel Farage, I think, has kind of hinted at that. But presumably, having been beaten by Reform, you wouldn't want that to happen.
So I think we should win the argument. I think the lines that both Kemi Badenoch and Rob Jenrick used in the Course to Leadership campaign, it is the job of the Tory party to make Reform redundant. It is not our job to assimilate them. And I think we have to win those arguments, because the thing that worries me about Reform, as I said a minute ago, is these are not tangible solutions that will make a difference. I get the frustration, of course I do, but if there were easy answers to complex problems, then over the last 14 years the Conservatives would have delivered them. Over the previous 13 years the Labour Party would have delivered them. The reality is that complex problems demand complex thought and complex approaches, and that's what grown-up politics means.